All right, we're ready.
I'm so ready.
Well, hey, welcome back to another HC Conversation podcast. I'm Paul.
I'm Phil.
And today we are unpacking, once again,
Unpacking.
Yesterday's message.
Expressively.
Where you were talking about the church as family.
Oh, yeah.
And I really liked how you started off with a
Violence.
National Geographic clip of a lion taking down a zebra.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
Thank
But
you.
the point was really powerful that you're making there, that a lot of times when it comes to our life, our faith, I mean, we're told to be the lion, basically. We're told to go get them. Nobody's the boss of you. You be your own boss. You be your boss babe, you know.
Boss babe. Boss babe.
And most of the time it turns out that we're actually then the zebra, that we're getting taken down by Satan, who comes to steal, kill, and destroy, that he roams around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he can devour.
Yep.
And a lot of times we're oblivious to the fact that we are off on our own, about to be devoured, because we've walked away from community, from the ones that can help check us, help, what am I looking for?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Protect. Fight for.
Yeah, that was one of the things that you said. We need
over and over
family
again.
that can fight for us. That you need the church to fight for you when you get out of line, when you don't have faith. And I think it's beautiful because I think we have a church that does that.
I think we do it.
And now we can do it better.
Yeah, we can always do it better. I think we do it well, and we can always do it better. Yeah. The Nat Geo clip was fun because I actually had to condense that and trim that down, and I actually faded it out before it got really, really violent. First of all, that lioness that leaps over of the zebra and simultaneously in air spins and goes right for the neck, and I'm like, that was impressive. And then the narrator goes to, the lioness takes down the zebra, and then everybody else comes to eat. The males first, and then the females, and then whatever's left goes to the cubs, which is why actually many of them don't survive. Man, nature is violent. But anyway, and so it was a little kind of close-up shot of some lions licking their bloodied fur. I'm like, yep, that's
That's nature.
That's nature, which, by the way, for anybody who's like, well, yeah, we're just products of nature. Materialism is no, we're not. You can't live that way. That's a violent, bloody place. God is real, Christianity is true, and the world is better for it. Anyway, the point is, the zebras, their defense mechanism is to stay in the herd. Even zebra stripes are actually a defense mechanism, because when they're all bunched together, it makes it hard to see. But yeah, so it's when the zebra gets isolated that they go down. And so just talking about that idea, oftentimes, when we talk about church being family, we talk about it from the perspective of, oh, we're family.
It feels like family
It
here.
feels like family, which a lot of times I think people are lying when they actually say that. I mean, I think there's just when we say it feels like family, there's just a general nicety. And I'm like,
it's nice and it's small.
it's warm and fuzzy. I'm like, really? Does your actual family make you feel warm and fuzzy all the time? But diving in more to, it's no, what does a family fights for one another. You can't survive outside of your family. When you're born into the world, you have to have family to feed you, to clothe you, to literally to bring you into the world, and then to fight for you all along the way. And sometimes fighting for you means fighting against you, because saying, hey, that's stupid. You need to stop that. You're grounded. And it's a silly example, but that's what we need the church to do.
Yeah.
The Apostle Paul talks all the time about that we're in a spiritual battle. We are fighting against our enemy, Satan, and it's Peter then that says he's like a roaring lion.
Right.
But you bring those ideas together, Satan is a roaring lion looking to devour us. Jesus says Satan's come to steal, kill, and destroy. Paul says you're in a battle against our spiritual enemy, and over, the emphasis is on we fight this battle together. You don't fight it on your own.
Yeah.
You're not some sort of, you're not the lion who's yeah, I'm going to stand up to Satan because I'm so, man, that's just a recipe for disaster and for you to get your jugular chomped out by Satan, right? And yeah, so it's just that idea of hey, if the church, our church or any church is not a family, we're people sitting in a room together for a service, but that's not church.
No, that's not family.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was the message. That was a big idea. Just the challenge. Is hey, who is fighting for you? Who is fighting alongside you? And who are you fighting alongside of? Because if we don't have that posture, like we're missing what the church is supposed to be.
Yeah, and I think a lot of churches have lost that focus and lost that really what the church is supposed to be, the mission focus, and it becomes it's really interesting because it turns inward on itself and begins to shrink and die, but it's not like a natural family is, because natural families end up reproducing, and you end up most of the time with babies being born. But a lot of times churches
They don't have no babies.
they ain't got no babies.
It's not a problem in our church right now.
Not a problem at our
there
church.
There are babies everywhere. There's something in the water here.
Good problem to have here. Be fruitful and multiply.
We slipped something into the coffee at Hope Community.
That's why people like it so much.
That's right. Careful drinking the coffee at Hope Community. You might find yourself having a baby. Not true, by the way, if you're thinking about checking our church out. There are a lot of young families having babies, but
it's just the stage of life that our church is in.
Yes, we're just taking the first command of the Lord seriously.
But yeah, a lot of churches, they get off track and they forget that we're supposed to reach out, that we're supposed to make disciples, and instead it becomes all about hanging out with the disciples I already know instead of making new disciples.
Yeah. Spiritual reproduction.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's. Let me put a pin in that for a second. We're going to come back to that because I had another thought that I don't want to lose. When we're talking about a church that we fight for each other, and that's tied to mission as well, and like reaching out and making other disciples. I mentioned at the beginning of the message that being kind of an island and wanting to like just rule things on your own, that very much is something that men are sucked into. Mm-hmm. And there is something that I think the church has done a bad job at when it comes to men, is that there is and I'm not saying this isn't true of women as well, so save your comments. I'm just saying there's something particular to men in which like we need something to fight for. And sometimes fight is turned into like a bad, like, well, we always got to fight. Like, it doesn't have, I'm not talking about actual fist fighting, but like there's something that's hardwired, I think that God has put in men to say, like, I need a cause to fight for. Mm-hmm. I need a family to fight for. Like, I need to know that actually something really high is required of me. And a lot of times in church, we just completely lost that. We kind of just turned it into like, oh, just come and be. Mm-hmm. And that's a big thing right now within like Christian circles. Like, just don't do, just be. And I'm like that actually drives guys away. Like, no, like I need something that I can do. Mm-hmm. Like, and then that I have like a brotherhood to do that with.
Right.
And so, like, as we talk about too, like in the church and the life cycle that churches go through of not having that, like, what are we actually fighting for here? Like, nothing. We're just kind of, I don't know, what are we doing?
Right.
Like that's a huge question. Mm-hmm. And so we do see this, a church going through a life cycle where it has not reproduced. You're a church that hasn't had babies in a spiritual sense. So maybe you've not a church that hasn't launched other churches and sent like church planners out or raised up pastors like generations down, like, oh cool, I'm going off to be a pastor, I'm going to pastor a church, or just raised up disciples who are going to pass on the faith to their children and their grandchildren and their coworkers and those kind of things. And so I think a natural rhythm in a church life cycle is, church has spiritually reproduces and makes disciples. You have like spiritual children, and then there's spiritual grandchildren, and then the cycle continues. Right. Sometimes that cycle recontinues within a local body, right? So you've got churches that are decades or centuries old that have done it really well.
Right.
That's like we've raised up spiritual children and grandchildren, they've had children and grandchildren, and we're passing the faith on. But sadly, a lot of times what we see is the life cycle just stops somewhere. We did not spiritually reproduce, mm-hmm. and there's just death. Actually, there's a correlation that we can get into there with culture in general right now, that people are like, no, we're not going to have children and pass things on. That's kind of what the church spiritually has done.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's reflective of just culture, because church a lot of times is sometimes downstream from culture, good or bad, and it shouldn't always be like that. Yeah. But I think that's just naturally where we find ourselves sometimes.
Yeah.
So
I think church should be setting culture.
Yeah, it should be.
Not capitulating.
But I think sometimes, that desire not to have children in our culture comes into the church and it's like, yeah, I'm good. I don't need that. Yeah, I'm good with my golden retriever. Whatever that is in the church analogy.
What's my spiritual golden retriever?
It could be the knitting club. It could be whatever. I don't know.
We don't have
a knitting club here.
Somebody wants to, I'm sure. Yeah, I don't want to. I mean, I kind of want to step on toes a little bit, but not like in a mean way, because this isn't everybody's perspective. As it relates to like having family and having children, like in just the world in general, some people are in a situation where they can have children. Other people choose not to. And and this is not, I'm not making this up. This is what you see people talking about, hear them posting about. You hear them talking about, you see them posting about, so, strike that, reverse it. Is the reason why, it's like, well, my freedom. I want to travel. I want to enjoy my life. I don't want, honestly, what they're saying, I think it's really sad and messed up. I don't want the burden of children. The rise of the dinks, dual income, no kids. Like, well, we can just enjoy all of this. And like you take that same kind of mentality into talking about the church as a family and your spiritual offspring, that same mentality exists. Well, to really pass the faith, like that's burdensome. That requires something of me.
It's costly.
I can't. I don't have to. If I don't do that, I don't have to have roots. I don't have to be anchored down. I don't have to be committed to this place. Like, yeah, it costs. And so I think there's something to be said there. And so we got a bunch of dink Christians, dual income, no spiritual kids, right? We're just like it's sad.
And
not like that sounds really mean. Sorry to cut you off, but it's like I don't think people maliciously have done that. I think that's just kind of crept into the culture of the church. So.
Because along with what's required of those churches to continue to live is a requirement that they must change and adapt how they're presenting the gospel, what their worship service looks like in order to reach the next generation. Because like it or not, we are a consumeristic culture. That's like, you like having heat and AC. Okay.
That's right. And chairs to sit in.
If there's no chairs, no heat and AC in your church,
I'm going to church there.
Yeah, you're not going to like it. So, it's about your preferences to some degree. And so a lot of times, churches are about those preferences instead of saying, okay, what can I lay down for the sake of the next generation in order to, maybe I'm not going to like things as much, but if I see more young people coming to this church and getting discipled and baptized, then that's worth it.
Yeah.
But sadly, a lot of those churches find themselves in that point where they're going to die, like literally their members are dying out. And so what should some of those, what should we do?
That's tough, right? Because that is the life cycle conversation. Like that is the natural cycle of, we're talking about the church as a family. So we're talking about a local congregation or the church. Part of the life of families is family members, they're born, they grow up, they die. And sometimes they've had children and that lineage is passed on, and other times they're just gone. And I think that's where we're at with a lot of the church in the West in general.
The church itself isn't going anywhere.
No.
Jesus said that I will build my church and nothing can stop it.
Yeah, because the church in other parts of the world, my goodness, the church in the global South, the church in India, the church in like China, like exploding. I mean, just massive growth and revival, and people like having dreams of like Jesus coming to them and dream. I mean, it's just, and like that's important what you said, because Jesus did promise to build his church. He said, I will build my ecclesia, my gathering, the called out ones, and the gates of hell or Hades, death itself, will not stop it. See, sometimes I think, as we think about the conversation of a church family and that kind of life cycle, we think, well, Jesus promised to build his church, so we're good. It's like, Jesus did promise to build his church. He did not promise to build yours. He did not promise to build ours. Yeah. And I think even for us as leaders of a church that's young and growing and we're in a good place, to always keep that in mind. Like, there's no guarantee that like next week our church ain't going to be here. Yeah. I mean, by the grace of God, hopefully it will be. And we're praying that like he continues to work, but we have to keep that in mind. Like, there's not a guarantee that any particular church will last, but the church will. like in a community, it's like, well, we've always been here. We've been here for this long. It's like, that doesn't mean you always will be. The church, like Christians will always like be here, but that doesn't mean your expression of it will be. And so there's got to be like a humility that comes along with that. And then like an open-handedness, I think, is what I want to get at, of, as you said, being willing to letting go some of our preferences and really having hard conversations around what are the essentials of faith, of what it means to be a Christian, of what it means to be part of the family of God, broadly speaking, not just our, because it's kind of like extended family, right? Not just our family here, but the extended family of God. We hold on to those things. Everything else we got to hold, with an open hand, to say, hey, our order of worship, the word is our liturgy. Like when we come together, how do we do things? Like our cultural expression of things. What does the preaching look like? What does the music sound like? How do we engage with the world around us? Like, we talk about outreach. I can't think of an example. Billy Graham style crusades. They don't work anymore. That doesn't mean they were wrong. It doesn't mean they never worked, but they don't work now.
Yeah, culture's different.
In some places, they still might. But, knocking on someone's door and being like, if you were to die today, like that doesn't work anymore. Or at least not, there are things that would work better. Just opening the doors and saying, hey, we're here, come to church. That's not effective. Just continually being like, well, here, you just have to do it because the Bible says so. It's like, well, you're assuming that we're in a culture that holds the Bible with high regard, or holds tradition with a high regard, Gosh, I'm trying not to step on toes because I love people, but I think you see this a lot of times denominationally. People that, older generations, well, we're fill in the blank. We're Lutheran. Well, we're Methodist. Well, we're Baptist. Well, we're Presbyterian. And so, by implication, we've always done it like this for hundreds of years, and it's always worked, and so we're going to continue to do it like this. That's not even entirely true, because it's like, no, you've even changed in your own stuff, but I need to sip my coffee, because I feel like I'm meandering and rambling, but so you say things.
So now, I think what you're trying to get at is churches that find themselves in that situation where they're literally dying, they're not reaching anybody. The best thing that they could do for their community, for the kingdom, is to use the resources that they have for kingdom good.
Yeah.
Look where God is moving in your community and say, you know what, maybe it's time that we cease to exist as, a local expression of XYZ denomination, and we become part of this church that God has breathed on, that God is moving. And we leverage our resources to bless them, to come together, so that way we can be better together, that we can multiply what God has given us for the benefit of the kingdom, and not just hoarding those resources for ourselves, because one day we're going to die and it's not going to benefit anybody.
And something that was kingdom resources, kingdom ground, kingdom territory, like of that physical location and that place and that heritage and that legacy will be gone and be turned into something else. A couple weeks back, I went to a concert in Columbus. I went and saw Zach Top. It was at the Bluestone. Well, the Bluestone is a historic, I think it was a Baptist church. Like, Bluestone being like the big stone building, massive. I mean, you could fit, I think there was probably like 1,000 people in there. I mean, just huge. And it was this very vivid reminder of like, this was a place where people gathered to worship. Like, this was a place where it was like the gospel was preached, where lives were changed. And now this is a place where concerts are held and things that go on with concerts. I mean, just like, listen, there was people were having a good time. We'll say that, right? And I'm like, and that happens all over the place. Like, how many churches are now breweries and restaurants and houses? People are like, oh, look at the beautiful architecture of my house. It used to be a church. And it's like, that should be a wake-up call. Like, in America, we're like, we're fine, we're good. We're still, like, that's pretty much every church on every corner in Europe, because there was an unwillingness to be like, okay, what's God doing?
Yeah.
I like that you said, what's God breathing on? Because I think a lot of times, instead of saying, okay, how is God moving? What is he doing? How can we come alongside like what God is doing, where his spirit is at work? we're kind of like, no, we're doing our thing over here, Spirit of God. Like, we want you, God, to come breathe on our thing instead of just going, okay, no, God, like, you're the one that's going to do what you're going to do. Like, let us get in line with that. And so that's a hard thing to talk about, hard thing to say. But the next, gosh, let's just think in our lifetime, say we live to be, healthy old men, 50 years maybe, the landscape of church is going to look wildly different.
Yeah.
It just is.
The next 15 to 20.
Oh, yes.
Is going to be massive, I think. Because you're going to see a lot of these mainline denominations and smaller churches, they can't keep the lights on anymore because there's not enough people, not enough resources, and so they literally just die and close the doors.
Yeah. And so I think the church, like individual churches, but the church, like we have to have like the mentality to ask, okay, we kind of see where things are going. We can either be intentional about how this all happens, or it can just happen to us in terms of like, living out the rest of our days as a church and closing the doors, or actually having kingdom impact, and saying no, like, and we're back to the family conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, we may die, but this family, like there is a spiritual heritage that is going to be continually passed on. We have to replicate ourselves. We have to make disciples. And the family sometimes has to come together, right? As we talk about each individual church is maybe like our immediate family, but we're part of this larger, family of God, the extended family. And sometimes you got to have a family reunion, all right, and get everybody together and be like, wow, what could we possibly do together? I know that's a struggle that I have sometimes, like, 'cause I'm like, let's do things, and we're still like a smaller church. And I'm just like, there's certain things that we could do in terms of gospel impact and spreading the gospel and blessing our community, meeting physical needs and spiritual needs and emotional, like, and doing these things. It's like, but our footprint, we just like, we can't do that. But I'm like, well, what if 3, 4, 5, like churches all said like, well, let's stop being 3, 4, 5 churches and just be the church, the body, the family of God in this community. And wow, what could happen? And what if that happened not just in our community, but our neighboring communities and around the country and around the world? As we're like, okay, around the world, it's not even as much of an issue because it's just like in some of these places where the gospel is exploding, there is only one church community.
Right.
They're not like, it's not like, well, we're this over here, we're this over here. It's like, well, no, we're just Christians and we got to huddle together and like do our own thing because everybody else is trying to kill us right now, right? And so,
I think
just want to see it happen, man.
I think that's a great way for us to end our conversation today, is just that desire, that dream to see that happen, to see churches, the family of God united around his mission in their community, to see greater kingdom impact and greater influence for Jesus, for his kingdom. But also then the beauty of the spiritual heritage that gets kind of rolled together.
Yeah.
That it's just so beautiful to hear, the story of one church, like where they started, the faithfulness and the dream to see that, and now we're, it's like, and we saw that fulfilled, and now this is the next chapter. God is now doing this. Yeah. And so we don't know what God's going to do, but it'd be exciting to be able to see that.
Yeah, and I've been reading and listening, I think you have as well, like there's so much like kind of like church history based stuff lately and just to see that down through like the millennia of how the heritage like from going all the way back to Jesus and the first apostles, and like this is just getting passed on and passed on and passed on, and nothing remains forever other than like the word of God, like the gospel message of Jesus, and the fact that his church is still here. But you can trace that spiritual history and lineage and just see, and you can even trace your own streams of it, right? Like, I can see where like how my story has intersected with this. And I don't know, I think it's just important in our time for the church to see that and to understand that and to say like, this it's not going to end with us.
Right.
Like number one, like Jesus is going to build his church. But as far as it does depend on us, like no, not on our watch, right? This is not.
So, wherever you find yourself, we just invite you to engage with God's family. Maybe you are a Christian and
family.
it's like,
Sorry, I'm interrupting you.
church isn't that important to me. You know, I go on occasion.
Yeah.
But maybe it's time to re-engage, to engage with God's family, to have that family that fights for you, that knows you, that can encourage and support you. Because you're really missing out without that.
Absolutely.
And if you've been to church and it's like, yeah, I'm not missing anything now. Maybe you need to find a different church and find one that God's Spirit is moving in where, man, if you're not there, you're missing something and you're missing out on what God has for you.
Yeah.
So we'll be back here next week as we wrap up our series that we've been in
On the church.
on the church.
Yep.
So have a great week.